Hey guys, tonight we are drifting back a few thousand years to the sun drenched banks of the Nile, where the sand is warm, the gold is excessive, and you are currently the most powerful person on the planet. Imagine waking up on a bed of gilded ebony, surrounded by servants who treat your every yawn like a divine prophecy. It sounds like a dream, right? Well, except for the fact that your morning routine involves enough heavy minerals to make a modern toxicologist faint, and the constant risk of being trampled by a stray hippopotamus on your way to the bathroom. Honestly, between the blistering heat and the fact that antibiotics meant rubbing moldy bread on a wound, you probably wouldn't survive a week in the Old Kingdom, but at least you die looking incredibly shiny. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you. Are you tucked in for the night or just looking for a moment of peace in a busy day? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You slowly open your eyes to the soft, like rhythmic sound of a feather fan brushing the air. The ceiling above you is painted a deep lapis lazuli blue, speckled with gold stars to mimic the night sky. Because even when you're awake, the heavens must remain within your reach. You try to stretch, but your limbs feel a bit heavy. Perhaps it's the sheer weight of the linen sheets, or maybe it's the realization that as Pharaoh, your day starts long before the sun actually hits the Great Pyramid. You are the living Horus, the mediator between the gods and men, and yet your first official act of the day is dealing with a very persistent fly that seems entirely unimpressed by your divine status. A servant approaches silently, kneeling so low his forehead nearly touches the polished limestone floor. He's holding a bowl of water scented with lotus blossoms. You dip your fingers in, the coolness a sharp contrast to the dry Egyptian air already creeping into the chamber. It's 1300 BCE, give or take a century, and the city of Thebes is beginning to hum with life outside your palace walls. You can hear the distant, muffled calls of merchants and the splashing of oars in the Nile, but in here, everything is muted, filtered through thick stone and expectations of grandeur. Next comes the grooming, which is less of a quick wash and more of a full scale restoration project. Your personal chief of the sense steps forward. This is a man whose entire career depends on making sure you don't smell like the humid marshes. He begins by applying a thick layer of galena and malachite paste around your eyes. It's the iconic eyeliner we all know, but you quickly realize it's not just for the aesthetic. It's basically an ancient version of polarized sunglasses to stop the desert glare from searing your retinas. Plus, it's supposed to keep the eye infections at bay, though you suspect the lead content might be doing something interesting to your long term cognitive functions. As they apply the oils, frankincense, myrrh, and something that smells vaguely like cinnamon, you look at your reflection in a highly polished copper mirror. You look like a god, or at least a very expensive statue. Historians still debate the exact composition of these ancient cosmetics, but sitting here, you can feel the grit of the minerals on your skin. You realize that being a pharaoh means never having a natural look. You are a canvas. You are a brand. If you walked out without your kohl eyeliner, the priesthood would probably have a collective heart attack and declare the sun had gone out. The most taxing part of the morning, however, is the beard, or rather, the lack thereof. You are perfectly clean shaven everywhere because hair is considered a bit low class and far too inviting for lice. But because a pharaoh needs a beard to show authority, you have to strap on a ceremonial false beard made of goat hair and gold thread. It's held on by a tight string that goes over your ears, making you look wise while simultaneously giving you a mild tension headache. You wonder if the commoners realize that their living god is currently struggling with a chin accessory that's slightly off center. There's a soft clink of jewelry as they slide heavy gold pectorals over your chest. Each piece is embedded with turquoise and carnelian, shaped into protective scarabs and vultures. You are essentially wearing a suit of spiritual armor. It's heavy, it's hot, and it makes a specific jingle every time you breathe, which is a great way to make sure no one can sneak up on you. You catch the eye of a young servant who is frantically trying to polish your sandals, and you give a tiny, sarcastic smirk. He immediately looks terrified and bows again. That's the thing about being the king of Upper and Lower Egypt. Your smallest gesture of human irony is interpreted as a potential death warrant or a sign of an impending drought. You step out of your bedchamber, the sandals clicking against the stone. Your joints pop, a reminder that even with all this gold, your body is still just a collection of bones and organs. The Nile is the heartbeat of this land, and you can feel its presence even through the walls. It has flooded perfectly this year, which means the people are happy, the granaries will be full, and you won't have to deal with any awkward, why are the gods angry at you conversations with the high priests today. As you walk through the colonnaded hall, you pass a series of murals depicting your supposed victories in battles you barely remember attending. In one, you are 10 feet tall, crushing enemies like they're made of papyrus. In reality, you're currently just wondering if there's any of that fig bread left from last night. You realize that the gap between the pharaoh of the wall and the pharaoh of the morning is wide enough to fit a sphinx. The air is getting warmer now, that thick golden Egyptian heat that feels like a physical weight. You reach the outer courtyard where the scent of baking bread and roasting meats starts to waft in from the kitchens. Your stomach growls, a very undivine sound that you hope the flutist playing in the corner didn't catch. It's time for the first meal of the day, a feast that would make a modern brunch spot look like a desert wasteland. But as you approach the table, you remember the royal physician's warning about your heavy teeth. Ancient Egyptians loved their honey, and even as a king, you aren't immune to the prehistoric agony of a cavity caused by too many date cakes. The priests are already waiting by the entrance to the dining hall, their shaved heads gleaming in the light. They begin a low chant, blessing the food and your appetite. You take your seat. A throne, really, because why sit on a chair when you can sit on a masterpiece? And prepare yourself. The luxury is intoxicating, but the routine is relentless. Every bite you take is a ritual. Every sip of wine is a libation. You are the center of the universe, but sometimes you just wish you could eat a piece of fruit without someone writing a poem about how your teeth are like white lilies of the Nile. You reach for a cluster of purple grapes, cold from being kept in a shaded ceramic jar. As you pop one into your mouth, you look out towards the horizon, where the pyramids of your ancestors cut sharp triangles into the haze. They look so permanent, so silent. It's a bit of a mood killer for breakfast, honestly, staring at your future tomb while eating your grapes, but that's life in the 18th dynasty. Everything is about the after, even when you're very much in the now. The first section of your day is complete. You are washed, painted, gilded, and fed. You feel a bit like a very fancy piece of furniture, but the sun is up, the Nile is flowing, and you have a whole empire to pretend to run while actually just trying to keep your false beard from falling into your beer. The breakfast table before you is a sprawling geography of carbohydrates and questionable dental decisions. In the ancient world, being a pharaoh means your breakfast isn't just a meal, it's a political statement. While the average farmer out in the fields is tucking into a humble bowl of emmer wheat porridge and maybe an onion if it's a lucky Tuesday, you are staring down a mountain of honey-soaked cakes, roasted gazelle ribs, and enough figs to keep a small village regular for a month. You reach for a piece of flatbread, which is surprisingly gritty. This isn't because the royal bakers are lazy. It's because the stone querns used to grind the flour leave behind a fine dusting of desert sand. You're literally eating the landscape. It's no wonder that even the most powerful kings ended up with teeth worn down to the gums by their 30s, a fact that modern bioarchaeologists love to point out with a mix of pity and professional excitement. You signal to a servant who pours you a goblet of thick, unfiltered beer. Now, don't imagine a crisp craft lager. This stuff is more like a boozy smoothie, sweet, yeasty, and full of enough nutrients to constitute a liquid loaf of bread. It's the national drink consumed by everyone from the pyramid builders to the royal family. You take a sip, feeling the coolness slide down your throat, and wonder if the divine essence the priests keep talking about is actually just a very successful fermentation process. The irony isn't lost on you. You are worshipped as a provider of life, yet you're currently nursing a mild sugar rush from a breakfast that would give a modern nutritionist a literal heart attack. As you nibble on a roasted quail, you notice the chief physician hovering near the pillars. He's looking at your jaw with a sort of predatory concern. He's obsessed with the idea that the demons of the mouth are particularly active during the harvest season. You try to chew on the other side of your mouth to avoid his gaze, but it's hard to be subtle when you're wearing a crown that weighs 5 pounds. The ancient Egyptians were actually quite advanced in medicine, but their dental plan basically consisted of hope for the best or apply this paste of ground up mouse bones. You decide then and there that as long as your teeth stay in your head, you'll keep the mouse bones in the lab and out of your breakfast. The hall is filled with the scent of burning kefi, a complex incense made of raisins, wine, and various resins. It's supposed to cleanse the air of bad spirits, but mostly it just makes you feel a bit drowsy, which is a dangerous vibe when you have a scheduled meeting with the vizier to discuss tax quotas for the southern provinces. You watch a servant meticulously arrange a bowl of pomegranates, their red seeds glistening like the rubies you're currently wearing on your fingers. You realize that your life is a series of beautiful, edible still lifes. Everything is curated. If a pomegranate seed falls on the floor, it's not just a mess, it's practically a cosmic glitch. You lean back, feeling the gold embossed leather of your chair press against your spine. Across the table, a scribe is already busy scratching notes onto a piece of papyrus, recording what the living god ate for breakfast. It's a bit invasive, honestly. Imagine having someone live tweet your cereal consumption for the benefit of future generations. The Great One has consumed 3 figs and looked slightly annoyed by a grape. You wonder if, in a few thousand years, people will look at these records and think you were a culinary genius or just a guy who really, really liked honey. The historians are still debating whether the royal diet led to the widespread obesity seen in some mummies, but looking at this spread, you feel that excessive is perhaps an understatement. Suddenly, a small cat, sleek black and wearing a gold earring that probably costs more than a peasant's house, struts onto the table. It sniffs at your gazelle ribs with an air of extreme entitlement. In any other culture, this would be a hygiene violation. Here, it's a religious experience. The cat is a representative of Bastet, and if she wants a rib, she gets a rib. You watch her delicately lick a drop of honey off the tablecloth. You suspect the cat knows exactly how much power she holds. She looks at you with those slit-like eyes, and for a second, you're not sure who is actually running the 18th dynasty. You give her a small piece of meat, and she purrs, a sound that, in this quiet, incense-filled room, sounds remarkably like a celestial approval. The vizier enters then, his sandals slapping against the stone with an urgency that ruins the relaxed breakfast vibe. He's carrying a stack of tablets and looking like he hasn't slept since the reign of Thutmose III. You realize the honeymoon phase of your morning is officially over. The transition from man-eating figs to king of the world is always a bit jarring. You take one last sip of your beer smoothie, wipe a stray bit of malachite eyeliner from your cheek, and prepare to discuss the price of grain and the logistics of mud brick production. You think about the farmers out there, the ones whose labor paid for this feast. They're probably eating their bread and onions right now, looking up at the palace and thinking you're having some sort of magical, transcendental experience. Little do they know, you're mostly just sitting here wondering if it's too early to take off the false beard, and if the sand in the bread is going to cause a chip in your front tooth before the noon prayers. Breakfast has been cleared, but the weight of your roll is just beginning to settle, quite literally, around your neck and on top of your head. You move from the dining hall to the dressing chamber for the final phase of your transformation, the hair and the headgear. In ancient Egypt, your natural hair is a secret, a private vulnerability that must be guarded. Underneath that elaborate headdress, your head is likely shaved smooth to combat the relentless heat and the even more relentless lice that plague everyone from the lowliest mud brick maker to the royal family. But a bald pharaoh is a pharaoh without heka, or magical power. So enter the wig, A masterpiece of human hair, sheep's wool, and beeswax, woven into thousands of tiny, perfect braids that hang heavy around your shoulders. You sit as two attendants carefully lower the wig onto your head. It's surprisingly heavy, like wearing a thick woolen rug in a sauna. But wait, there's more. On top of the wig, they place a small white cone of scented fat. This is the perfume cone, a detail that has puzzled and amused historians for decades. As the day grows hotter, the wax and fat slowly melt, trickling down your wig and over your linen robes, releasing the scent of lilies and myrrh. It's meant to keep you smelling divine during long ceremonies, but in reality, you just feel like a human candle. You can feel a warm, oily droplet beginning its slow journey down the back of your neck. It's uncomfortable, it's sticky, and you're pretty sure it's going to stain the expensive pleated linen. But such is the price of being a walking, talking air freshener for the gods. Next comes the crown. Today it's the Shent, the double crown, representing your rule over both the lush delta of the north and the narrow valley of the south. It's a complex piece of engineering, combining the white hedjet and the red deshret. It towers above your head, adding at least another foot to your height. You have to learn a specific way of walking, a slow, stabilized glide, to ensure the crown doesn't tip forward and turn your divine entrance into a slapstick comedy. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a silver mirror and think that if you were to trip, you'd probably be stuck like a lawn dart in the limestone floor. The irony is that while you look like the most powerful person in existence, you feel like a toddler trying to balance a stack of plates on your head. Your wardrobe is completed with a shenty, a kilt of the finest, most transparent linen. It's been starched into hundreds of knife-edge pleats that rustle like dry papyrus whenever you move. It's incredibly breathable, which is a blessing in the 100-degree heat. But it's also so white, it's almost blinding. You realize that your entire existence is a battle against the elements. The sun that wants to burn you, the dust that wants to dull your gold, and the gravity that wants to topple your crown. You are a walking symbol of Ma'at, or cosmic order. But inside, you're just wondering if you can scratch your nose without dislodging 3 layers of ceremonial accessories. The master of the robes gestures to a tray of rings. You choose a heavy signet ring carved from a single piece of carnelian, depicting a sphinx trampling your enemies. It's a bit aggressive for a Tuesday morning, but it's part of the uniform. As you slide it on, you remember a gossip you heard from a scribe. Apparently, some of the previous kings used to wear so much jewelry that they needed servants just to help them lift their arms during speeches. You're not quite at that level of luxury-induced paralysis yet, but your wrists are definitely feeling the strain of 3 pounds of solid gold bangles. There is a brief moment of silence before the doors to the Great Hall are thrown open. You take a deep breath, feeling the scented wax from your head cone smudge slightly against the string of your false beard. The transition from private person to public icon is nearly complete. You aren't just you anymore. You are the Great House, the Pharaoh, a being whose very shadow is thought to bring fertility to the soil. It's a lot of pressure for someone who still has a bit of honey-soaked fig stuck in their back molar. As you prepare to step out, you notice a small mirror maker polishing the copper surfaces near the door. He doesn't look up, but you see his reflection. He looks tired, his hands stained with the green residue of his craft. For a second, you feel a strange sense of kinship. He's shaping the image of the world, and you're the one who has to live inside it. You adjust your posture, tuck your chin carefully because of the beard, and step into the blinding light of the courtyard. The heat hits you like a physical blow, and the smell of the melting wax cone intensifies. You are ready to rule, even if you're currently 10% gold and 90% beeswax. The historians often debate whether the elite of Egypt truly enjoyed these elaborate fashions, or if they were victims of their own status. Looking at the sheer complexity of your outfit, you lean toward the latter. It's a magnificent prison. But as the trumpets sound and the crowd in the distance begins to roar your name, you realize that while the wig is itchy and the crown is heavy, the view from the top is literally divine. You just have to hope no one notices you're sweating through your masterpiece of a kilt. The doors to the audience hall swing open with a heavy, rhythmic thud that echoes against the towering sandstone pillars. As you glide forward, maintaining that precarious balance of crown and wax, you enter a space designed specifically to make everyone else feel like an ant. The air here is cooler, trapped by massive stone walls, but it's thick with the smell of hundreds of unwashed bodies masked by an aggressive amount of incense. This is the heart of your daily grind, the morning petition hour. You take your place on the high throne, which is essentially a gilded chair of torture, beautiful to look at, but ergonomically designed by someone who clearly hated backs. As you sit, a sea of officials, priests, and nervous looking provincial governors hit the floor in a synchronized wave of proskynesis. They aren't just bowing, they are smelling the earth, literally pressing their faces into the dust because your presence is supposedly as blinding as the midday sun. You look down at the top of the vizier's bald head and feel a sudden, irreverent urge to see if you could land a grape on it from this height. Instead, you maintain your pharaoh face, an expression of detached, stony serenity that suggests you are currently contemplating the mysteries of the afterlife rather than the fact that your left foot has gone completely numb. The first petitioner is a minor noble complaining about a boundary dispute involving a sycamore fig tree. His voice is a high-pitched drone that competes with the buzzing of the flies. Ah, the flies. They are the true masters of the Egyptian palace. They don't care about your Heka or your double crown. They just see a very shiny, very still target. You watch one land right on your coal-rimmed eyelid. You can't swat it. To swat a fly is to break the divine illusion of stillness. Thankfully, you have your fly whiskers. Two young boys standing behind you whose entire career path involves waving long palm fronds to keep the insects off the royal personage. If they miss one, you might have to spend the next 10 minutes staring at a fly's legs while a man talks about irrigation ditches. The vizier stands up and begins reading from a long papyrus scroll, listing the morning's incidents. Apparently, a sacred bull in Memphis has looked vaguely disappointed by its grain, and a shipment of cedar from Byblos is running 2 weeks late. You nod solemnly, making a mental note that being a god mostly involves listening to people complain about logistics. Between the formal speeches, the officials pepper their sentences with titles like the Good God, the Lord of Appearances, and the Smiter of the Nubians. It's a lot of branding to live up to before lunch. You realize that if someone just called you by your actual name right now, the entire room would probably implode from the sheer awkwardness. Then comes the great flattery. This is a mandatory part of the session where the court poet recites a hymn about how your breath is like the north wind and your eyes are like the twin fires of Ra. You listen to this while the perfume cone on your head continues its slow, oily meltdown. You feel a drip of scented fat reach your eyebrow. You're currently being compared to a celestial storm while you're literally melting like a candle. It's the ultimate ancient Egyptian expectation versus reality moment. Historians often find these hymns inscribed on temple walls and treat them as literal truth. But sitting here, you know they're basically just the Bronze Age version of a very suck-up LinkedIn post. There is a brief interruption when a group of foreign envoys from the Hittite Empire is brought in. They look uncomfortable in the heat, their heavy wool garments making them smell like a wet carpet. They bring gifts, vessels of silver and strange, tasseled textiles, but you can see the calculation in their eyes. They aren't here to worship. They're here to see if the new pharaoh is a warrior king or a nap king. You straighten your spine, making the gold bangles on your arms clink with a menacing authority. You give them a look that says, "I have crushed entire nations," while in your head you're actually thinking, "I wonder if I can hire these guys to find me a better way to secure this false beard." The session drags on. You hear about a village where a demon is allegedly stealing the beer supply, which is almost certainly just a very thirsty local official, and a debate among the priests about whether the new temple should face 3 degrees further east. Through it all, the irony of power remains your constant companion. You are the source of all law, yet you are bound by 1,000 years of tradition that dictates exactly how many seconds you must pause between sentences. You are the richest man in the world, yet you can't even go for a walk without 40 people following you to record your footprints. As the vizier finally rolls up his scroll, you give a slight nod to signal the end of the audience. The sea of people rises, their linen robes rustling like a field of dry wheat. You stand up, slowly, because of the foot numbness and the crown weight, and prepare to exit. You've successfully managed to not swat a fly, not lose your beard, and not fall off your throne. In the world of Egyptian diplomacy, this is considered a highly productive morning. But as you walk back toward the private chambers, you catch a whiff of that melting wax again and realize that the most powerful man in Africa currently smells like a very expensive floral salad. Leaving the cool, incense heavy air of the audience hall, you decide to take a royal inspection tour of your most ambitious project, your eternal house, the Great Pyramid, currently rising on the Giza Plateau. You are carried in a litter, a gilded chair balanced on the shoulders of 12 sturdy guards who move with a practiced rhythmic swaying that is supposed to be relaxing, but actually feels like being seasick on land. Seasick on land. As you approach the construction site, the sheer scale of the chaos hits you. Thousands of men are swarming over blocks of limestone. The air is thick with white dust, and the sound of copper chisels hitting stone creates a constant, metallic ring that vibrates in your very teeth. You expect to see a scene of pious devotion, with workers joyfully hauling stones for their living god. Instead, you find the royal overseer looking like he's about to have a nervous breakdown. There's a massive commotion near the base of the structure. It turns out the work has ground to a halt. Are they tired? No. Are they injured? No. They are on strike. And the reason? A logistics failure in the vegetable department. Apparently, the latest shipment of garlic, onions, and radishes, the holy trinity of the ancient Egyptian workers' diet, has failed to arrive. Without their pungent snacks, the laborers have laid down their ropes and are currently sitting in the shade of a half-finished mastaba, looking remarkably stubborn. You find yourself in the bizarre position of being a divine monarch negotiating over a pile of onions. You watch as the overseer pleads with a burly stonecutter who insists that the garlic isn't just food, it's their strength and their medicine against the desert heat. You hide a smirk behind your hand. It's a detail that often gets lost in the grand history books. The fact that the greatest monuments of human history were fueled by the world's most intense case of garlic breath. Historians still marvel at the organized labor of this era, often debating if it was a system of slavery or paid service. But as you stand here, it's clear it's a system of no onions, no pyramid. The dust is starting to settle on your pristine white kilt, turning your royal attire into a dull, chalky gray. You walk closer to the base of the pyramid, feeling the immense weight of the stone above you. Each block is fitted so precisely that you couldn't even slip a papyrus reed between them. It's an architectural miracle, but all you can think about is how hot it must be inside those narrow transit shafts. You catch the eye of a scribe who is frantically counting baskets of dried fish to compensate for the missing radishes. He looks at you, panics, and accidentally tips over his inkwell. You give him a small, reassuring nod, realizing that the great pharaoh is currently the only person on site who isn't screaming about root vegetables. As you prepare to head back to the river, you notice a small group of architectural consultants, priests who specialize in the alignment of the stars. They are arguing about the north-facing shaft, claiming it needs to be adjusted by a fraction of a finger's width to perfectly catch the soul of the king as it ascends to the North Star. You listen to them bicker about celestial geometry while a nearby donkey brays loudly, perfectly punctuating their most serious points. It's a strange mix of the sublime and the ridiculous. You are building a staircase to the stars, but it's being built by men who are currently grumpy about their lunch menu and a donkey that clearly has opinions on astronomy. The heat of the afternoon sun is now at its peak, and the white limestone of the pyramid is reflecting the light with a blinding intensity. You feel the grit of the desert in your mouth, a reminder that no matter how much gold you wear, the Sahara always wins. You decide that the onion crisis is a problem for the vizier's afternoon and signal for your litter bearers to return you to the palace. As you swing away from the dust and the noise, you look back at the rising monument. It's a giant geometric ego trip, yes, but it's also a testament to the fact that even a god king is only as powerful as his supply of twai and hangtai. As your litter sways back toward the cool sanctuary of the palace, You find yourself passing through the Royal Menagerie, a place that smells of exotic musk and expensive hay. This is your personal collection of living, breathing gods, but today it feels more like a chaotic nursery. You see a cheetah lounging on a limestone wall, looking at you with the same couldn't care less attitude as your advisors, and a row of baboons that are currently screeching at a confused looking ostrich. But the real business of the afternoon isn't with the living, it's with the immortalized. You arrive at the Royal Taxidermy Workshop, where the atmosphere is thick with the scent of natron salt and cedar resin. You are here to check on the progress of your favorite hunting dog, a lean and loyal hound who recently passed away. In ancient Egypt, love doesn't end at the grave. It just gets wrapped in high-quality bandages. The head embalmer, a man with remarkably steady hands and a permanent scent of vinegar, shows you the progress. Your dog is currently being stuffed with sawdust and lichen to maintain his good boy shape. It's a strange, touching sight. You realize that while you're building a pyramid for yourself, you're spending a small fortune ensuring that your pets have a first-class ticket to the afterlife, too. The workshop is filled with thousands of tiny mummies. There are mummified cats, mummified ibises, and even a mummified Nile crocodile that looks like a very scaly, very grumpy burrito. Historians often marvel at the sheer scale of the Egyptian animal cults, sometimes uncovering millions of these bundles in underground galleries. As you walk through the rows of linen-wrapped creatures, you realize this isn't just about religion. It's about not being lonely in eternity. You imagine yourself in the field of reeds, the Egyptian heaven, playing fetch with a dog that has more resin in him than blood. It's a bit macabre, sure, but it's also strangely comforting. You notice one of the younger embalmers trying to wrap a mummified shrew, a tiny creature that seems hardly worth the expensive linen. You ask him why, and he whispers that the lady who commissioned it believed the shrew would guide her through the dark tunnels of the underworld because of its excellent sense of smell. You nod, hiding a smile. The pharaoh of the world is currently taking spiritual advice from a man holding a preserved rodent. There's a persistent debate among the priesthood about whether a mummified animal actually knows it's in the afterlife, or if it's just a spiritual battery for its owner. You decide that, either way, your dog deserves the best sawdust the royal treasury can buy. The heat in the workshop is stifling, as the natron needs a dry environment to draw the moisture out of the bodies. You feel a bit like a mummy yourself, draped in your heavy gold and melting wax, standing in this salt-filled room. You take one last look at your hound, now looking much more eternal and much less shedding on the rugs, and give a sign of approval. As you leave, the scent of the resin clings to your robes, a sticky, sweet reminder that in this land, death is just a very long, very expensive afternoon of spa treatments. You step back out into the bright Egyptian sun, feeling a sudden, intense appreciation for the fact that your own heart is still beating, even if it is currently hidden behind a 3-pound golden scarab. The dust of the pyramid site and the heavy scent of the embalming workshop have left you feeling a bit earthbound, so you decide to retreat to the one place where a pharaoh can truly find a breeze, the Nile. Your royal barge, the splendor of the two lands, is waiting at the private quay. It's a magnificent vessel of cedarwood, draped in purple sails and gilded from stem to stern. As you step onto the deck, the transition from the scorching land to the cool, shimmering water is like a literal blessing from the goddess Tefnut. You take your seat under a canopy of fine linen, watching the river folk scramble out of the way as your oarsmen begin their synchronized beat. Floating down the Nile is the closest you get to a vacation. From here, the world looks manageable. You see the farmers working the shadufs, those long-armed water lifters, and they look like tiny, diligent figurines from one of your own tomb models. But don't let the serenity fool you. The Nile is a busy highway, and even a king has to deal with traffic. A flotilla of grain barges is currently hogging the main channel, and you watch your captain scream insults at them that are definitely not found in the Book of the Dead. It's a reminder that even as a living god, you can still get stuck in papyrus boats and cattle rafts. Suddenly, the water near the bow erupts in a massive spray. A hippopotamus, looking like a giant angry slab of wet granite, has decided that your gilded barge is an intruder in its territory. The guards immediately reach for their harpoons. In your official propaganda, you are often depicted slaying the chaos in the form of a hippo, but in reality, you're currently gripping the arms of your throne and hoping the boat doesn't tip. These creatures are the true terrors of the river, fast, territorial, and remarkably unimpressed by your double crown. The captain manages to steer the barge into deeper water, leaving the grunting beast behind, but the adrenaline lingering in the air makes your divine serenity feel a bit fragile. You settle back as a servant brings you a bowl of chilled wine, cooled by being wrapped in wet cloth and placed in the shade. You look at the banks and see a group of laundrymen beating clothes against the rocks. You think about the sheer amount of work that goes into keeping your white kilts, well, white. It's a constant battle against the silt of the river. Historians often debate the social structure of these riverside workers, but from your vantage point, it's clear they are the unsung heroes of the Pharaoh brand. Without them, you'd just be a guy in a dirty dress. The sun is beginning its slow descent, turning the Nile into a ribbon of molten gold. The air is filled with the calls of ibises and the distant, rhythmic chanting of a nearby temple. You realize that this river is the only reason any of this, the gold, the pyramids, the honey cakes, exists. It's a fragile, beautiful life, balanced on a thin strip of green between two vast, unforgiving deserts. You feel a sudden, rare moment of humility. You don't own the Nile. The Nile just happens to be tolerating you this century. You take a long sip of wine, listen to the lap of the water against the hull, and let the gentle rocking of the barge prepare you for the complex evening rituals that lie ahead. The sun has dipped low enough that the river air feels damp, and your body is starting to remind you that being a god is physically exhausting. You return to the palace, but instead of the banquet hall, you are steered toward the House of Life, where the royal physicians are waiting. You've been complaining of a dull throb in your jaw, that heavy tooth again, and a slight irritation in your eyes from the desert grit. In ancient Egypt, doctors are specialists. You don't just see a doctor, you see an interpreters of the internal organs, or in this case, the guardian of the royal anus. Yes, that was a real prestigious title, though thankfully not the one you need today. The head physician, a man whose skin smells permanently of sour milk and crushed herbs, examines your eyes. He looks grave, as if he's spotting a demon hiding behind your iris. He reaches for a ceramic jar containing a dark, pungent paste. This, he whispers with immense pride, is a mixture of galena, honey, and the fermented excrement of a sacred crocodile. You freeze. You are the pharaoh, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, and a man is currently trying to put crocodile poop in your eye. It's a moment of profound existential crisis. The medical science of your time is a wild gamble where the line between a miracle cure and a biohazard is incredibly thin. Historians still scratch their heads over the Ebers Papyrus, debating how a civilization that could perform brain surgery also thought rubbing lizard blood on a bald spot was a good idea. You politely decline the crocodile-based ocular treatment, opting instead for a simple wash of willow bark tea, a natural source of salicylic acid that actually works. The physician looks slightly offended, as if you've just insulted the crocodile's personal contribution to the medical field. Next, he turns his attention to your tooth. He suggests a filling made of ground-up malachite and resin, or perhaps a chant to Sekhmet, the goddess of healing and destruction. You realize that dentistry in 1300 BCE is mostly just a test of one's pain tolerance and faith in the power of rhythmic humming. You decide to stick to the humming for now. As the attendants wrap your wrist in a linen bandage soaked in celery juice, apparently good for calming the blood, you look around the room. It's filled with scrolls containing recipes for everything from how to stop a baby from crying, spoiler, it involves poppy seeds, which we now know is basically ancient sedation, to how to prevent a house from being infested with snakes. You realize that your life is a constant negotiation with a nature that is trying to bite, sting, or infect you at every turn. Even with your golden walls, you are just a fragile organism in a world of very aggressive microbes and very confident crocodiles. The physician finally finishes his ministrations, leaving you smelling like a damp salad garden. He bows deeply, reminding you that your health is the health of the entire nation. If you sneeze, the Nile might not rise. No pressure. You walk back toward your private chambers, feeling the celery juice dripping slightly under your gold bracelets. You think about how, in the future, people might look back at these remedies and laugh, but right now, with the cool wind blowing through the limestone vents, you're just grateful that the guardian of the royal anus didn't find a reason to visit you today. The medical drama is over, and the evening air has finally turned from a searing blowtorch to a velvet caress. You've shed the heavy double crown for a lighter blue Khepresh helmet, which is still quite heavy but feels like a baseball cap in comparison. Now comes the time for the social games of the divine. You find yourself in the palace courtyard where a Senet board has been laid out on a low ebony table. Senet is more than just a game to you. It's a simulation of the soul's journey through the Duat, the underworld. The board is a grid of 30 squares, and the pieces are small ivory cones and reels. If you win, it's a sign that the gods are pleased with your path. If you lose, well, it's going to be a very awkward conversation with the high priest tomorrow. Your opponent tonight is your youngest sister, a princess who has a terrifyingly sharp mind and zero interest in letting you win just because you're the pharaoh. She tosses the 4 flat casting sticks, the ancient Egyptian version of dice, and moves her piece with a smirk. The gods seem to favor my passage through the Hall of Truth tonight, brother, she says, her voice smooth as Nile silt. You realize that while you've been busy building pyramids and negotiating onion strikes, she's been perfecting her endgame. Historians still argue about the exact rules of Senet. Some think it was a race game, others a complex spiritual allegory. Nhưng ngồi đây, bạn chỉ biết rằng nếu bạn rơi vào ô House of Water, bạn sẽ bị kẹt ở đó cho đến khi đổ được số chính xác, và điều đó thật là bực bội một cách không thần thánh chút nào. As you move your ivory reel, you notice the shadow of a servant pouring more wine into your goblet. He moves with such silence that he's almost a ghost. You think about the Ka and the Ba, the different parts of the soul that the priests talk about. According to them, even your shadow has a life of its own. You look at your shadow on the limestone floor, elongated and distorted by the flickering oil lamps, and wonder if it's currently having a better time than you are. Does your shadow have to wear a false beard? Does your shadow have to worry about the price of cedar from Byblos? Probably not. It just gets to dance on the walls while you try not to lose a board game to a teenager. There's a soft rustle in the palm trees nearby. The palace cats are out in force now, their eyes glowing like tiny embers in the dark. One of them jumps onto the Senet table, scattering the ivory pieces with a flick of its tail. Your sister laughs, but the priests nearby look horrified. An animal interrupting a sacred game could be an omen of a civil war, or worse, a bad harvest. You, however, just feel a sense of relief. The cat has effectively declared a stalemate, saving you from a humiliating defeat. You reach out and scratch the cat behind its ears, feeling its rhythmic purr vibrating through your fingers. It seems Bastet has decided the game is a draw, you announce, keeping your voice deep and authoritative. You lean back, watching the stars begin to pierce through the darkening sky. The ancient Egyptians were master astronomers, mapping the imperishable stars that never set. You realize that your life is just a tiny blink in the eyes of the cosmos. Yet here you are, dressed in enough gold to buy a mountain, playing a game of chance while your pets decide your fate. The irony is as thick as the incense. You finish your wine, the sweetness of the dates lingering on your tongue, and decide that for tonight, the gods can handle the underworld on their own. You have a banquet to attend, and you really need to make sure the kitchen hasn't run out of those honeyed quails. The playful tension of the Senet game is replaced by a much heavier atmosphere as you move to the Hall of Truth for the evening's judicial summary. In Egypt, you are the supreme judge, the living embodiment of Ma'at, cosmic balance and justice. But tonight, the case on the docket is a bit more grounded than celestial balance. A group of craftsmen from the necropolis has been caught trying to borrow gold leaf from a half-finished sarcophagus. You sit on a smaller, less ornate chair, leaning forward as the magistrate recounts the crime. The thieves were caught because they tried to pay for beer at a local tavern with scraps of gold that still had the royal seal stamped on the back. Not exactly the criminal masterminds of the century. As you listen to the evidence, you notice how the magistrate keeps glancing at your face, trying to gauge if you're in a merciful or heads will roll kind of mood. You realize that your facial expressions are basically the national legal code. If you look bored, they might get a fine. If you look angry, they might lose an ear. It's a terrifying amount of power to have while you're also trying to deal with a persistent itch under your ceremonial collar. You think about the punishments of the time: beating with sticks, forced labor in the turquoise mines, or the dreaded nose cutting. Historians often point out that ancient Egyptian law was surprisingly consistent, but it definitely didn't have a three strikes and you're out rule. It was more like one strike and you're looking for a prosthetic nose. The head of the group of thieves, a man whose hands are stained with the very gold he stole, begins a long, rambling defense involving a demon that possessed his left arm and made it grab the gold leaf. You look at him, your expression carefully neutral. It's a classic move, blaming a minor deity for your own lack of self-control. You've heard similar excuses from generals who lost battles and priests who forgot to feed the sacred cats. You decide that the demon needs a lesson in economics and sentence the men to 3 years of hauling stone for the very tomb they were robbing. It's a poetic, slightly ironic justice that keeps the labor force moving without the mess of an execution. As the guards lead the men away, the magistrate begins to read out a list of great curses that are to be inscribed on the tomb to prevent future incidents. These curses are legendary. May the hippopotamus be against him. May the crocodile be against him. May his heart be weighed and found lacking. You listen to these terrifying threats and realize they've become a bit of a bureaucratic formality. It's the ancient equivalent of a no trespassing sign, but with more soul-devouring monsters. You wonder if the thieves actually fear the crocodiles or if they just fear the guys with the sticks who work for you. The session ends with a ritualistic cleansing of the room. A priest sprinkles water from a silver bowl, murmuring that the balance of the world has been restored because a few scraps of gold are back in the treasury. You feel a bit cynical about the cosmic balance part, but you appreciate the order. You are the glue holding this society together, a god king who has to spend his Tuesday nights worrying about stolen gold leaf and possessed arms. As you stand up, your knees give a loud human crack that echoes in the silent hall. The magistrate bows, pretending he didn't hear it. You walk out into the corridor, the torches flickering against the walls, and realize that being the source of justice is mostly just a very long, very repetitive exercise in listening to people lie to your face. The heavy business of justice leaves you feeling a bit drained, but a pharaoh's desk is never truly clear. You retreat to a smaller, more intimate side chamber where your royal scribe is waiting with a stack of fresh papyrus and a look of mild exasperation. This is the hour for international relations, or as you like to call it, the great whining of the Bronze Age kings. You are currently sifting through the Amarna letters, diplomatic correspondence from the rulers of Babylon, Mitanni, and the Hittites. As you read the transcriptions, you realize that being a superpower in 1300 BCE mostly involves managing the hurt feelings of other monarchs who think you aren't sending them enough free stuff. The first letter is from the king of Babylon. It's a masterpiece of passive aggression. He starts with 10 lines of flowery greetings about your health, your horses, and your chariots, but quickly pivots to the real issue. The gold you sent him last month was not quite as yellow as he expected. He actually has the nerve to suggest that your goldsmiths might have cheated him. You give a short, dry laugh. Everyone in the ancient world knows that gold in Egypt is as common as dust on the roads, and yet here is a king complaining about the hue of his bullion. Historians love these letters because they reveal a complex web of brotherly love that was really just a high-stakes trade negotiation. You decide to dictate a reply that is equally polite and equally stingy, perhaps suggesting that his eyesight might be failing in his old age. Next is a message from a minor prince in Canaan who is absolutely terrified of a group of nomadic raiders. He begs for troops, chariots, and grain, promising eternal loyalty in exchange for a few hundred archers. You look at the map, a piece of linen marked with charcoal, and realize that sending troops that far north would cost more in logistics than the entire province is worth in tax revenue. It's a cold calculation. You are the smiter of nations, but tonight you're more of a CFO of the Nile Delta. You tell the scribe to send a strongly worded letter of support instead of soldiers. It's the ancient version of thoughts and prayers, and you know it won't solve his raider problem, but it keeps the diplomatic papyrus flowing. The air in the room is still, save for the scratching of the scribe's reed pen. You notice a letter from a Hittite princess who is being sent to join your House of Women as part of a peace treaty. She expresses her concern about the extreme dryness of the Egyptian climate and asks if you could perhaps send some of that famous Nile lily oil to meet her at the border. You smile. Even in a world of crumbling empires and divine kings, people are still worried about their skin routine. You order the scribe to send double the amount of oil because a moisturizer-based peace treaty is much cheaper than a chariot-based war. As the scribe rolls up the final scroll and seals it with a lump of wet clay and your signet ring, you realize that your empire is held together not just by stone and bronze, but by these fragile threads of communication. You are at the center of a global network of beggars, complainers, and cosmetic-loving princesses. It's a lot of weight for a man who is currently feeling a very human hunger. You dismiss the scribe and walk toward the balcony. The stars are bright now, and the distant sound of a lute tells you the evening banquet is finally ready. You take a deep breath of the night air, which thankfully smells more like blooming jasmine and less like the king of Babylon's complaints. The palace has fully transformed under the cover of darkness. Gone is the sterile white light of the desert day, replaced by the flickering amber glow of thousands of oil lamps and torches that cast long, dancing shadows across the painted walls. You are now entering the festival of Bastet, the cat-headed goddess of protection and joy. This isn't one of those stiff, formal court sessions. This is a full-scale assault on the senses. The air is thick, so thick you could almost carve it, with the scent of burning frankincense, roasted meats, and the sharp, floral tang of lotuses floating in every wine jar. As you take your seat on a low, cushioned dais, a troupe of dancers begins to move to the rhythmic clashing of sistrums and the deep, vibrating thrum of harps. Their movements are fluid, almost serpent-like, and you find yourself mesmerized by the way their gold jewelry catches the light. You realize that tonight, the pharaoh is more of a spectator than a ruler. People are drinking, and not just a little. The ancient Egyptians believed that getting slightly tipsy was a way to reach a state of religious ecstasy, and judging by the vizier's currently crooked wig, the court is reaching enlightenment very quickly. You take a sip of your own wine, which has been flavored with pomegranate juice and honey, and feel the tension of the onion strikes and the Hittite letters begin to dissolve. In the corner, a group of musicians is playing a melody that sounds both haunting and festive. Historians still try to reconstruct the scales of ancient Egyptian music, but sitting here, it feels less like a science and more like a heartbeat. A young girl approaches you, offering a fresh lotus flower. You take it, and as you breathe in its heavy, sweet perfume, you remember a strange fact you heard from the high priest. The blue lotus has mild sedative properties. No wonder everyone at these parties looks so incredibly relaxed. You're essentially at the world's most expensive, gold-plated chill-out session. You give the girl a small ring from your finger, and she vanishes into the crowd with a grin that could outshine the sun. Suddenly, a massive platter is carried in, bearing a whole roasted ox, decorated with garlands of flowers. It's followed by baskets of honey-drenched pastries shaped like animals, birds, fish, and even tiny edible pyramids. You reach for a piece of honeycomb, the sweetness so intense it makes your jaw tingle. You watch a court jester, a dwarf from the southern lands who is treated with immense respect and high status, perform a series of acrobatic tumbles that make the crowd roar with laughter. There is no irony here, just a raw, vibrant celebration of life. You realize that for all the obsession with death and the afterlife, your people are remarkably good at being alive. As the night deepens, the music grows faster and the laughter louder. You see a high-ranking general trying to teach a temple cat to dance, which mostly involves the cat looking insulted and the general looking ridiculous. You catch the eye of your sister across the room. She's still wearing her I beat you at Senet smirk, but she raises her goblet to you in a silent toast. You feel a rare sense of belonging. In this room, surrounded by the smell of jasmine and the sound of lutes, the weight of the crown feels a little lighter. You aren't just a god tonight, you're a man with a full stomach and a favorite song. However, even in the middle of a party, the pharaoh brain never quite shuts off. You notice a scribe in the shadows, discreetly counting the wine jars being consumed to calculate the temple tax for the festival. You hide a smile. Even the gods have to pay their dues. The fire in the braziers begins to burn low, turning the room into a hazy golden dreamscape. You feel the lotus scent and the wine pulling at your eyelids. The festival will continue long after you leave, but for you, the journey toward the ultimate luxury, a quiet, dark room, is about to begin. The music from the festival follows you like a faint heartbeat as you slip away through a side corridor guided by a single torchbearer. Instead of heading to your bedchamber, you feel a strange, midnight urge to visit the Royal Sculptor's studio near the Palace Gardens. You are currently in the middle of a tomb-wide renovation project, and you want to see how your eternal face is progressing. Entering the studio is like stepping into a ghostly assembly of yourself. Rows of limestone and quartzite heads stare back at you from the shadows, some young and idealistic, others with the slight, weary droop of a man who has spent too many hours listening to complaints about cedar wood. The master sculptor, a man whose hair is permanently white with limestone dust, is still awake, refining the curve of a granite ear by the light of an oil lamp. He's not surprised to see you. He knows that pharaohs often get existential around midnight. You stand before a life-size statue of yourself, carved from a single block of black diorite. It's magnificent, but you lean in closer, squinting. The nose, you mutter, gesturing with a gold-ringed finger. It's a bit aggressive, don't you think? The sculptor bows, hiding a tired smile. It is the nose of a conqueror, great god. It signifies the breath of life and the scent of victory. You look at him, then back at the stone. It signifies that I might trip over my own face if the wind blows too hard. Make it a bit more elegant. This is the strange reality of your life. You are micromanaging your own immortality. Historians often analyze these statues to see if they represent a realistic portrait or a stylized ideal. But sitting here, you realize it's actually a bit of both. A negotiation between your actual face and the one you want people to bow to in 3,000 years. You notice a small chip in the corner of the statue's kilt and point it out. The sculptor sighs, a very small, respectful sigh, and reaches for his copper chisel. You realize that you are essentially the world's most demanding client for a product you won't even be around to enjoy. The studio is filled with models of your afterlife kit. There are tiny wooden soldiers, miniature granaries, and even a small, beautifully carved boat that is supposed to carry your soul across the celestial river. You pick up a small blue-glazed Ushapti figure, one of the hundreds of tiny servants who will do your work for you in the afterlife. According to the spells inscribed on its chest, when the gods call your name to pull weeds in the heavenly fields, this little guy is supposed to jump up and say, "Here I am." You look at the little figurine and think about how much easier your life would be if you had a "Here I am" guy for your morning meetings with the vizier. The smell in the studio is a mix of damp clay and the acrid smoke of the lamps. It's a grounded, earthy smell that contrasts sharply with the perfume cones and incense of the banquet. You feel a sudden, deep connection to the craftsmanship. These men are carving your legacy into the very bones of the earth. You wonder if, far in the future, people will look at this black diorite face and see a god, or just a man who was very particular about the shape of his nose. The historians will debate your reign, your wars, and your building projects, but they'll never know about this midnight conversation or the way your knees pop when you bend down to inspect a Ushapti. You leave the sculptor to his work, the rhythmic tink-tink-tink of his chisel fading behind you. As you walk back through the gardens, the scent of blooming night jasmine hits you, a reminder that the living world is still here, vibrant and fleeting. You are a man of stone and a man of flesh, balanced on a knife edge between a party and a tomb. You look up at the stars, those imperishable ones, and realize that your black diorite nose is currently the least of your worries. You have a few hours of sleep left before the sun demands you become a god again. The walk back from the sculptor's studio takes you through the deep, rhythmic shadows of the palace gardens, where the air is noticeably cooler and smells of damp earth and papyrus. But even in this sanctuary, you aren't truly alone. You can feel the presence of the Ka, the life force that the priests say lingers near the places we love. As you pass a row of sphinxes, their stone eyes seem to track your movement in the flickering torchlight. You find yourself thinking about the ghost of the palace, a story the younger servants tell about a previous queen who still wanders the halls, looking for a misplaced pearl earring. You don't necessarily believe in ghosts in the way a commoner might, but in a world where the veil between life and the duat is as thin as a linen sheet, you tend to keep your voice low at 3 a.m. You reach the entrance to your private quarters, and the guards strike their spear butts against the stone floor in a muffled, respectful salute. Inside, the oil lamps have been turned down to a low, golden amber. A single priest of the House of Life is waiting by the door, clutching a small bowl of dry, crumbled barley bread. This is the nightly offering to the protective spirits of the house. You watch as he sprinkles the crumbs near the threshold, whispering a charm to keep the night terrors and the restless shadows at bay. It's a strange, quiet ritual. You are the king of the world, yet you still rely on a handful of dry bread to make sure a demon doesn't crawl through your window while you're dreaming. As you sit on the edge of your bed, the servants begin the elaborate process of ungodding you for the night. They carefully remove the heavy gold pectorals, which leave red indented marks on your skin, the literal scars of status. The blue Kepresh helmet is lifted off, and for the first time in hours, your scalp feels the cool air. It's a moment of immense relief, like a weight has been lifted not just from your neck, but from your very soul. You reach up to rub the back of your head, feeling the stubble of your shaved scalp. You think about how many of your subjects think you sleep in your crown. If they saw you now, tired, slightly sweaty, and squinting in the dim light, the illusion of the living Horus might start to crack. The master of the bedchamber brings you a final drink, warm milk infused with honey and a tiny, almost microscopic amount of poppy juice to ensure a dreamless rest. As you sip it, you listen to the sounds of the palace settling. There's a distant creak of wood, perhaps the royal barge rubbing against the quay, or maybe just the limestone expanding in the cool night air. The historians still debate how much superstition played a role in the daily life of the elite, but as you stare at the shadows dancing on your wall, you realize it isn't superstition, it's a relationship. You are part of a living, breathing ecosystem of gods, ancestors, and household spirits who all expect a little attention. You lie back, feeling the linen pillow stuffed with soft waterfowl down, cradle your head. Your thoughts begin to drift, turning into a hazy montage of the day's events. The onion-starved workers, the grumpy king of Babylon, and the black diorite nose that still feels a bit too big. You realize that your life is a series of roles played out on a massive gilded stage. But in this room, in this silence, the stage lights have finally gone out. You are just a man tucked into a bed in a valley by a river, waiting for the sun to tell him who he needs to be tomorrow. The darkness feels heavy and protective, like the wings of the goddess Isis folding over you. You close your eyes, the taste of honey lingering on your tongue, and let the quiet murmurs of the ancient night carry you toward the edge of the world. The transition into the final hours of the night is a slow, silent surrender. You are now deep within the coon of the royal bedchamber, a space where the walls are thick enough to drown out even the most persistent desert wind. The servants have retreated, leaving only the soft, rhythmic breathing of a single guard stationed outside the heavy cedar doors. You lie perfectly still, watching the very last embers in the bronze brazier pulse with a faint, dying orange glow. It's in these moments, when the gold is off and the titles are silent, that you truly feel the passage of time. You think about the old kings who slept in this very valley, their names now carved in stone that is slowly being polished, smooth by the sand. You realize that your own reign is just a single heartbeat in the long, slow breath of Egypt. The air in the room has settled into a perfect, cool equilibrium. You can smell the lingering scent of the blue lotus from the festival, now faint and powdery, mixing with the clean, dry aroma of the desert that always finds a way through the limestone vents. You feel a strange sense of peace with the pharaoh of the stone you saw earlier in the sculptor's studio. Let him have the large nose and the eternal stare. You are content with the warmth of the blankets and the quiet thump of your own heart. Historians often speak of the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom as if they were different worlds. But sitting here, you know they are all just the same river, the same sun, and the same human desire to find a comfortable place to rest. Your mind begins to wander across the landscape of your empire. You imagine the silent pyramids at Giza, standing like giant stone sentinels under the Milky Way. You think of the workers in their village, finally sleeping off their onion-less frustration, and the priests in the temples who are already preparing for the pre-dawn rituals. The world is vast, mysterious, and beautifully indifferent to your mortal concerns. You find yourself smiling in the dark, a small, private irony. You spent all day being a god, but the most divine thing you've felt all 24 hours is the simple, heavy stillness of a body that has finally finished its work. The poppy honey drink has done its job. Your limbs feel like they're made of the same heavy diorite as your statues, sinking into the soft down of the mattress. The flickering shadows on the ceiling have stopped dancing and turned into a soft, uniform gray. You are no longer the smiter of nations or the guardian of the Nile. You are just a traveler preparing to cross the threshold into the world of dreams. You feel the goddess Nut, the night sky herself, leaning down to protect you, her body a canopy of stars stretching from the delta to the cataracts. As the silence deepens, the world outside seems to dissolve entirely. The palace, the river, the pyramids, they all become distant, unimportant echoes. There is only the cool linen against your skin and the slow, steady rhythm of your breath. You are safe, you are at rest. The cycle of the day is complete, and the mott of your own spirit is finally in balance. As the heavy, golden weight of the day has melted away into a soft, silver peace. Your thoughts are now just whispers, drifting like incense smoke toward the rafters. The journey is over, the story is told, and the river is calm. Let the desert stars watch over the land while you drift further and further away into the quiet, velvet embrace of the night. Sleep now, for the sun will return soon enough, but for these few hours, the world is silent and you are free. The light is fading, the shadows are still, and the world is drifting into a soft golden blur. You are floating on a river of stars, moving gently toward the horizon where dreams begin. Everything is quiet, everything is peaceful. The journey is complete.